Well, welcome to the February 12th Facebook stream. We're teaching Revelation. We're on stream 6. We're looking at the PDF, which is posted here on Anglo Israel, and you just scroll down and you'll see the free Bible charts, and it's posted right there to be posted. You click on that, that'll bring up the current stream. Now, whichever one you're looking at, will have the date on it. So as I post these on my website, I'll just put an updated date, and that'll be how current the PDF is, in case you got old ones from before. So you can only just go by the date. And I'm not going to put stream 1, all that. I'm just going to put that in the PDF, just like what I've got here. Now, what I do is I go back and I update, usually the beginning of it and so forth, and add new things, correct things, improve the how it reads, and so forth. Today, we're down on stream 6, so we did stream 5 last week. If you just scroll down, you'll see start stream 5, and then that was what we did on that one. And now we're on stream 6. And I said the second Revelation event is realized. And so I said, what is new as of late? I've seen videos and articles claiming that the current, and one of the things people are doing because of the censorship, not just on YouTube, but all over Twitter and all these social media sites are censoring certain words. So what people are doing is they're coming out with their own little initialism or acronyms or whatever people want to say, or they're just changing words, like the word that I want everybody knows, and people are using vacuum instead of the word that so you just have to learn what the words are that people are using. So I said the spelling has been altered to protect the innocent. So what we're basically doing on the web is people are coming up with all these little, and sometimes they're, like an acronym, and if you don't know what the acronym is, then you're kind of lost. But you can usually tell what's being talked about by what's being said. But what that's done is it's protected people from being censored by, saying some word, and then all of a sudden they're not able to, say anything because they get censored. And sometimes before the show is even done, it's already been taken off the web and scrubbed and all that. So everybody's just learning to come up with alternate words. So the word we're using today is vacuum, and I think everybody knows what vacuum is going to go along with. So people have been shooting video lately, and a lot of people are coming up with this idea finally that what's going on looks like genocide, or some are correctly calling a Holocaust. It actually is a Holocaust, but most people don't understand the what that word means, so not much point in it. But I said this is largely based on the VAERS reporting of the first group of victims to be harmed or killed. So that's the vacuum adverse event reporting. So I think everybody knows what that is, except that a lot of doctors didn't actually know about this. They didn't know about these adverse reactions that they were supposed to report all this. This goes back for many, many years. 30, 40 years, we've had this reporting system where if you're in the medical field and you get an adverse reaction, you're supposed to report this stuff. A lot of doctors didn't even know about it, which is amazing. I think it was, I'll have the videos on the top of my website. Instead of talking about stuff and putting it out on the web, I'll just put it at the top of my website. When I go through these streams, I'll just have a list of links on my website, and you just go there, and because I don't have to worry about that. If you talk about it, you might have to worry about getting censored. So that's the whole point. I'll just put it on my website. So a lot of these people in the healthcare industry did not know about adverse reactions, but now they are. Now they're starting to point out that, hey, that we're not even following our own laws, much less the Constitution, and we're making everybody stay at home, and people losing jobs. They're having all these problems. It's actually what we're doing is worse than anything that might have happened, to begin with. So we don't have this problem. It's all made up. They're starting to understand that, and especially doctors, and they're starting to talk out. So that's what I've been saying all along, is that, this is what's going to happen in Revelation and these events. We're going to have this beast government, which is basically a government that just forces you to do whatever it says. It doesn't matter whether it even fits their own law. They're just going to force it on people and make people to do things. They're going to, obviously, everybody's talked about the mark of the beast, blah, blah, blah. But I'm saying that we're actually in 1823, and that's how this whole tribulation period has started. Not what I thought it would be. I thought it would start with the trumpets. In other words, that's the way I've always taught it. Probably start with the first trumpet and go to the second. But now it's obvious that we start with 1823. And we have more and more people every day that are picking up on that and say, yeah, this looks just exactly like what 1823 says. You see? So I'm saying actually we're at on 1824 now. So we're in the second event. The first event was what it said. The second event was, or is, I should say, I guess, is that the holy people are going to be targeted and killed. So what is all this, these things that are happening? We've actually at the second part of that. In other words, this prophecy. We've already had 1823. We've had this sorcery event based on pharmaceuticals, which we've already completely described. Now we're at the second part, which is the result of the first part. Now we're at the point where people are dying needlessly. Your doctors and nurses and all these people in the healthcare industry have noticed it. And now you can't get them to take the jab, you see. You can't get them to follow these mandates for healthcare workers. And they don't want to do it because they've already seen the result, you see. So now we're at the result. So that's actually the second event. That's not the first event. You see what I'm saying? You still there? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're at the second event. We're not at the first. The first event's already happened. It's still playing out. It's not like it's over. The first event is still playing out. However, we've already passed the point where there's been this reaction to the event. And now the reaction is the people don't want to follow the laws to the point that a lot of them are just going to quit their own job if they're forced to follow along. So, that's the second event. That's, in other words, problem, reaction, solution. That's what we got going on. That's what all of your communism and all your Bolsheviks and all these people that are got all this knowledge of how to control nations. They take over control where they're in all the top positions, which is what it says in 1824. The most wealthy men are in control. That's what it's telling you in 1824. Well, what are they doing now? They're forcing people to follow their dictates. They're not laws. They haven't passed any law. They're just putting out dictates. Oh, it's an emergency. So under an emergency, we can just tell you what you have to do, kind of thing, right? So that's where we're at now. We're in event 2. Now, if you keep going with that logic, then what would be event 3? Event 3 is eventually, you got a lot more people who are not going to follow the dictates, and then there's going to be a riots, and there's going to be all this nationwide. Well, really it's worldwide, because there's some other countries now that don't want to go along with these dictates. So because they already realize how much problem it's causing in their own countries, so they're not going along. But the point is, who has enough power to force all the countries in the world basically to follow their dictates? That's the question. Now, it calls them in 1824. What does it call them? They're obviously the most wealthy, the most powerful men on earth are the ones calling the shots. So they're basically forcing these other countries. They can use trade. Well, we won't do trade with you. Or they can use the worldwide banking system to maintain their strong arm control over these countries, and use whatever they can. And they're probably using all those things. But like I said, those are actually listed as cabals in 921. It lists 4 cabals, worldwide cabals. So you got the big pharma, you've got the theft, which is your worldwide banking, you got the military industrial complex, and then you got the worldwide fornication, which we kind of got into on, I think, maybe the first or the second stream, what that means. It's broken down into 3 parts. So where are we at now? Well, I would say it looks like we're coming up on this cabal, this military-industrial cabal, which is going to obviously be starting this idea of a world war, which it describes in chapter 9, the trumpets, in other words. That's where your war takes place. So it's kind of spread out here in Revelation, but everybody understands that because they know this mark of the beast. Well, it's way over here in chapter 13. But this worldwide war, well, it's kind of described back here at the end of chapter 8 and into chapter 9. So you've got different things laid out there that looks like something's taking place here, something else taking place there, and so on. Kind of agree with that idea when you look at Revelation? Yeah, I mean, people look at it as they think it's going to be in a specific order, but it really isn't. It doesn't have to be in a specific order. I mean, why would the trumpets, for example, even need to be in a? Does trumpet 1 have to go off before trumpet 2, before trumpet 3? It looks like it's that way, but there's no hard fast rule that says it has to be that way. What if what we were seeing, we saw what looked like trumpet 1, then we saw what looked like trumpet 3, and we never saw trumpet 2? Does that really matter? You see, if we jump from trumpet 1 to trumpet 3, and then after trumpet 3, then we see what appears to be trumpet 2. I'm just saying, it doesn't really matter, does it? They don't have to be in a specific order.
One of the reasons Revelation is so hard for many people is because it's not chronological.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's just that it's not the way that we look at. It's not the way we write books. We don't write books where we go over here and do a chapter, and then we go back and do this other chapter. We don't go through and read a book that way. We don't look at a book and go to the next chapter. And of course, my wife does sometimes. She wants to look at the conclusion and then back up and see how we got to the conclusion. Now, I do that all the time. I always want to see how it ends, and you have to kind of do the Bible. What I notice about Scripture is you almost have to do Scripture that way. You have to look at what it's concluding with, and then look and see, okay, well, how did we get to that point? Because if you just read from the beginning to the end, well, it all kind of sums up at the end. The things at the end are what you needed to know to understood what was going on in the middle. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's the way Revelation is. You kind of need to know what's at the end and how it ends up to where you can go back and understand what happened in all these chapters before. Yeah, I've noticed that a lot with prophecy. Sometimes you need to go to the end of a book and kind of see. You couldn't understand. Here's a perfect example. You could not understand the first coming and the second coming in prophecy.
Yeah.
If you were alive way back when the prophets were alive, you see, and let's say you're now at the end of the Old Testament, and now you're what are you waiting on? Well, you're waiting on the coming of Christ. The problem is you have prophecy back there in Isaiah and Jeremiah and all these. You got all this prophecy of the first coming of Christ, and then you had prophecy of the second coming of Christ. It was not possible for the apostles to read the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament. It's not possible to read that and know that Christ was going to come, he was going to die, he was going to be raised, and then he was going to hang out for 40 days and teach the apostles, leave, and come back 2,000 years later. It doesn't really matter what the timeline is. The point is, there's no way you could read prophecy that way. There's no way. That's why they were so confused. They said, well, is the kingdom going to start now? Is it going to now commence, now that you've risen from the dead? Well, why didn't they know that? Well, because they couldn't read those prophecies and understand that concept. They had no concept of the first and second coming of Christ. Everybody expected Christ to come and fulfill all the prophecy. Not just part of it. They was expecting him to fill all. What's the logic of him coming, fulfilling some of the prophecy, and then leaving, and then coming back in the future? What was the logic of that?
Maybe we need to hear him again when we ask about these things in Revelation. Are we in the time of tribulation? Are we at the last war? Are we? I think his words would be, it's not for you to know the times and seasons.
Right. Well, and that's what he said. Yeah.
And that's what we know there. We can identify what's taking place, and it's not following a script like we think it should.
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. All the information's there. It's
Right.
just not in the order that people would have expected it. No one would have expected Isaiah to give a prophecy of the first coming and then a prophecy of the second coming immediately after if there was some big gap between the first coming and the second coming. No one would expect that. You don't write books like that, and no one would expect that to be written that way. But that's the way it is. If you go back, I can go right through Isaiah with people and show them you got prophecy of the first coming within prophecy of the second coming, and they're both going to happen. They're just 2,000 years apart. Whatever, it doesn't matter what the time period is. The point is there's this huge gap in between, and who writes like that? No one. So it's correct. It's correct as written. It's just that your timelines are not put in there, so you don't know. You don't realize there's this huge timeline. Well, things like that kind of happen, but the point is people just don't write like that. We write things in a historical format. We don't just split the things all up, and we just don't write like that. Well, we don't expect a book to be written like that.
I think the one reason people want to know a timeline, it kind of because it betrays our nature that we want to kind of live loosely until the last minute, and then we want to get things right.
Well,
and
sure.
If we know exactly when it's going to happen, we can do that. And I don't think God wants us to know exactly.
Well, no, I agree. However, he did tell us, and he says that he'll tell us beforehand all these things he's going to do. Right. Well, that was another, I guess you call it a prophecy. The point is that is what he did. He does give us all the information. It's the keys to figuring it out. So what we've been going over in the stream are trying to lay out the keys of figuring out Revelation. The keys we've got so far is that we can absolutely, beyond any doubt, show that it's these holy people are Israelites and they're Christian Israelites. There's two groups of Israelites. And that follows through Scripture. It's just most people don't realize it, don't look at it that way. The New Testament's written the same way. We just don't really look at it that way. We don't get that the fact that started, that's actually what the Abrahamic covenant says. We didn't realize that that's what it said. So we didn't realize that the Abrahamic covenant was about Christ. And today, besides you and a few other people, I guess, there just aren't not too many people that teach the Abrahamic covenant is Christ.
Yeah.
It's the promise of Christ, the Redeemer. That's what the Abrahamic covenant is. And I can point that out to people. In fact, on my site, I've got a whole, I think it's 18 videos titled You Are God's. And that's where I go through, and there's no point in us going to it today. But the point is, that's where I go through this stuff line by line through Genesis. That's where I start. Genesis 1, I go to the end of Genesis, point out where all Abraham, for example, had power with God. That's what the word Israel means. But Abraham had power because, well, why? Because Christ then gave Abraham prophecies about Abraham's life, what was going to happen to him in the future, the fact that he was going to have a kid, and the fact that his children, he was going to have posterity, and then all of this was actually given to Abraham. Well, other people weren't given prophecy by Yahovah, you see. God didn't come to everybody, he just came to Abraham.
Right.
They gave a covenant to Abraham. He didn't give it to everybody. He gave it to Abraham and Abraham's children. And then as you read Genesis, you see he splits out. Well, when he gets up to Esau, well, he didn't want Esau. Well, why? I don't know. Maybe he already knew what Esau was going to do or whatever. Who knows? However, he gave Esau's mother a prophecy. When the two twins, she says, why am I like this or whatever? So she prays to Yahovah, and he gives her an angel. It says an angel, I think, gave her this vision that there were two nations struggling within her womb. So one nation, he told her which nation was going to be in control of the other one. In other words, which son, in other words, for her, was going to be in control of the other. Esau had the birthright, but Esau, well, he didn't get it. Now, people say that, well, Jacob stole it, but no, Jacob didn't steal it. His mother was given a prophecy, and his mother acted on what she knew to be correct, where Isaac was going to go ahead and pass the birthright to Esau. His mother said, no, that's not what we were told. And obviously she told Isaac. I mean, come on. But
Yeah.
Isaac was going to go by basically what they considered the law, which would have been given the birthright to the elders. So that's what he was going to do, even though he knew that probably that Isaac, probably knew. I'm just saying that Jacob would have been a better person. I don't know. I'm just saying. But he knew about the prophecy.
All we know is all we know is God said He loved Jacob and hated Esau. We don't necessarily know exactly why.
Yeah, but we know that he didn't marry within his
right.
The people that even at that time, because it says afterwards that it indicates that marrying Hittites and Hivite women was a problem. Well, if it wasn't a problem,
Right,
they wouldn't have to tell you it was a problem. So obviously he knew it was a problem. He did at any rate.
Yeah.
And so maybe Isaac didn't feel that was a good enough reason not to give him a birthright. Well, whatever. I don't know. The point is, he should have known the prophecy. He should have known what Rebecca said, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So everything in Genesis, all these little logical arguments I've already covered in this You Are Gods. I spent, like I said, close to 20 hours on that. Then just go to my website and see it. Now, here's one thing that goes with what I was talking about, and I'll have this on the top of my website. We've got all these people in the medical industry. I'm going to put a long list of video links where people can watch the carnage that's going on right now, because you won't get it if you're watching TV. You're not going to hear about all these people that have been harmed. You might hear a few little mentions, but it's a lot worse than what your fake news on the TV is going to tell you. You got to go to other places if you want to find real news. So I'll be updating my website. I'll put video links, and then there's a documentary taking place right now, this week, and on into next week. You can get in, watch it for free. It's got the top doctors in the field explaining the con job that's taking place and the expected outcome from the mass ignorance of people who are taking this, being forced in some senses to take this jab that's going to be mandated on us because we got some type of, pandemic going on that most people think doesn't exist. At least people in the medical field are starting to talk out and say it doesn't exist. They're losing their jobs over it and so forth. So there's a link right there, vrevealed.com, and people can just go and watch that, and they can get the best people out there talking about it and saying what's going on. You can either believe that, or you can just go ahead and take the jab if that's what you think needs to be done. It'd be completely up to you, but you got plenty of good people who are providing the information. That's the point. You've got the ability to get the information. You might be getting censored on TV or other places. However, there are plenty of places where you can still go. You can still find people that will tell you the truth, regardless of their job. And what he's got up here right now on this website are people, most of the people that are on here have lost their job, lost their income, but they're like whistleblowers, speaking out the truth, regardless, because they don't want to see their own children, forced into doing something that's not even lawful. And really, that's what they're covering more than anything, is a lot of what's going on is a violation of federal law. They're actually violating current federal law in so many ways that if there was not this problem that the government says that there's this great infection going around, if that wasn't true, what's going on now, most of these people would actually end up in jail under federal crimes of what they're doing, if they weren't being exempted. That's what I'm trying to get. So they're all being exempted from these crimes that they're committing. That's what it really boils down to. They're being exempted from crime, from laws that are already on the books. They're being exempted. They're saying, oh no, there's this big problem, so we have to ignore everything we've done before. You see?
My experience is that I talk to people, especially in the line of people in the industry, They don't take the time to look or listen. They just think government is benevolent and they would never do anything bad, and they've got to have people in the health field, so they wouldn't kill us off. They've got to have us. Well, that's not right. They're going to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
We have to be smart enough.
There is obviously a people that have some determination, because they're spending billions of dollars to accomplish what they want, and what good is it going to do for them if all these people die? I mean, what good is it? Well, there's got to be some end result that they want, right?
Yeah.
If you look at what the Bible says, it looks like they're absolutely attacking the holy people. So obviously the whole Revelation is about killing the holy people, whoever those people are. Now,
right.
When you get to number 31 here, I keep getting this harping on this two witnesses thing and trying to make the point. I'm really not getting there yet, but here we are. So let's just read what it says. Look around the earth for a group of kindred people or nations of people speaking different languages, living in different nations that we could describe as holy people. That's in Revelation 13:7. Now, Revelation 13:7 actually is quoting or cross-referencing back to the two witnesses in 11:7. 11:7 is where the two witnesses are destroyed, but it mentions it in 13:7. So when you have the 13:7, you already got, as we pointed out before, you've already got these beasts. You've already got these four beasts. You've already got the mention that Satan is in control of the beast. That was 13:2. And then you've got the mention of the Satan in chapter 12. Now, what you also have here is you have two groups defined as beast empires. So we're talking about the two witnesses. They're controlled by the dragon. That's 13:2. That comes from Daniel's chapter 7, which is just I think the way I teach it is just a miniature explanation of Revelation. And they're called Lamb Kingdoms. That's up in 13:11. So they're conquered. Two witnesses are conquered, in other words, in 11:7. It talks about them in 13:7. And then again in 13:11, they're called Lamb Kingdoms. In other words, they're kingdoms who worship the Lamb, holy people. All through the Revelations about the holy people, here you have holy people who worship the Lamb or Christ. And this is according to older prophecies. They should be separated in something which could be referred into as a great nation and a kindred living in a commonwealth of nations, which are just as great. Who, according to the verses we looked at so far, will be subdivided into at least two groups: a majority of Christian believing, which I'm saying are the working class population, versus a non-Christian, possibly Satan worshiping, ruling elite. And we just got that last week from Acts chapter 7, or they're called mighty men in Revelation 18:24. So they've created this massive paradox between two groups. They're opposing systems of beliefs about proper government also being described in Revelation as well, because the Christian, in other words, Israelites, have followed one type of government or desire to, and the other group are the ones in control. So in other words, it's kind of like people that are abused and they keep going back to their abuser and keep electing new abusers, which are the same people that abuse them over and over and over, but they just can't get out of the system. They just keep going. They're not doing, the Bible had a system for getting godly leaders into office. It's the first thing Christ told people to do. Before he gave them the law, in Exodus chapter 18, he told them how to put a system into place to control the Israel people. And we didn't do it. So, but we can't get out of it. Now we're kind of stuck in that system where we're not actually looking for the godly leaders, which would probably be people from churches or whatever, but we're just going after and electing people, whoever's on the ballot. We're not putting them on the ballot, which is the problem. So that's just one good reason why we don't get the people we want. We're not putting them there. Now, I'm trying to point out these things are connected. So they ultimately describe the holy people being targeted in Revelation. So the definition of the children of Sarah starts actually in Genesis chapter 12. That's kind of where I was going with that, but I kind of missed the first part of it. So, saying on this Old Testament quotes in order, and I haven't been watching the clock, so I have no idea how far we're in. Do you know how far we've been going?
Yeah, we're probably in 35 minutes or so.
You think we're probably in over 30?
Right.
Okay.
If you got something to say.
No, but I kind of lost my track of thought, and I lost the beginning of this, which was up ahead. I think I didn't actually read it. So let's continue back on this Genesis. We'll hit on the main mentions of Christian Israel. What I said was I actually covered that before, and where I actually went into great depth on this was the You Are God's 16 or so videos where I just went through verse by verse all these connections that show that Abraham and his posterity all had power with God, and that's what the word Israel means. So of that group, though, there were still two groups, and that's actually the way it starts out in Genesis 12. It shows you there's two groups. One group that's blessed, one group that's going to be destroyed, and that comes from these quotes to Acts, which we covered last week. So that's kind of where I started. So, and the best way to figure all this out is using these Old Testament quotes versus the New Testament. So I've kind of pointed all that out, how the charts play out with that. And then, I mentioned there's the video. So only other thing I mentioned is that, well, the easiest way to get all this stuff that I've got on my website is just to get a thumb drive from me, and that's the way to go about it. So then we'll start with the basics, and the basics are going to start with number 38. So we'll end for today. On stream 7, we'll come back on this 38, and we'll go through these mentions of Acts in a little bit more depth on the blessing versus the destroyed Israelites. And those are going to end up being this great nation and this commonwealth of nations, which are then connected on up to Revelation. So that's what we'll come back with. And sorry, I got a little off on it today, but that's the best I could do. Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, that's all right. People who are interested know where to go get the facts. Oh, good.
Well, we're just trying to keep this as short as we can, try to make sense out of it. It's really not as easy to make sense out of as people think. It's hard to describe the overall context. It's really hard to get to that. There's got to be a good reason why people have missed this connection of the two witnesses back to the prophecy in Genesis 48, but I'm not quite sure why. It's obviously connected. But it might have something to do with the fact that people don't understand Christ is, promised to Abraham and so forth. So,
I think one of the reasons people miss it is that preachers have trained Christians to look at prophecy in terms of what's going on today, when really prophecy concerns what God said would go on today. Is a difference. So people, they want to read the newspaper and put it into Revelation. And to some degree you can sometimes, but sometimes you have to wait on things to come to be shown. So I don't claim to be an expert, but I enjoy listening to you.
Well, I have spent a lot of time looking at it, but trying to make sense out of it's the harder part. If you got unlimited time to talk to people and they're interested, that's, they pick up on whatever parts they pick up on, and then you just kind of fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Kind of cover it where everybody's going to understand it. That's a little bit more difficult.